In the first chapter of Acts, the risen Christ meets the disciples in Jerusalem and gives them one of the two major commissions that we find in the New Testament. First, of course, is in the Gospel of Matthew, to go and make disciples of all nations and to teach, to baptize. But this other commission Jesus gives to his disciples, and he says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." Those words describe ever-widening circles. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. So I want us to think about ever-widening circles as we think about this new ministry of our church. So I was thinking about that this week. I was thinking about a retreat that I attended many years ago. And the retreat leader called 7 or 8 of us up front and said, "Make a circle." So we sort of looked at each other, and most of us didn't particularly want to be called up front to start with. And so we're kind of figuring out what to do. And so we just kind of stand there in a circle looking at each other. And then she said, "I want you to make the circle in a different way." And so we kind of looked at each other awkwardly for a minute, and we joined hands. And then she said, "Now make the circle in a different way." And so we moved closer together. "Make the circle in a different way," she said. So we moved far apart. "Make it in another way," she said. So we put hands on shoulders. "Make it in another way." So we did sort of a football huddle. And she said, "How about another way? Can anyone think of another way?" And finally, someone in the circle said, "Hey, why don't we turn outside and look outward?" And so we all turned around with our backs to each other, and we looked outward. And we did 2 or 3 versions of that, which opened up all these new possibilities. And then someone said, "Hey, why don't we alternate? Some of us looking in, some of us looking out." And then someone else said, "Hey, why don't we turn sideways? We can look in and out at the same time." And we were learning in that process that there are a lot of ways to make circles, and that it's possible for you to look inward in a circle and to look outward more or less at the same time, to pay attention to what's going on inside and what's going on outside. The leader pointed out how long it took us to get to the place where we stopped looking only inward and we started looking outward. It's a journey all of us take. We take it in our own lives. We take it as a church, a Sunday school class, a community, a family. It is a journey to learn how to look not only inward, but outward. And then to learn how to do both, because both are important. We thought we were through. And then she said, "Well, okay, is there any other possibility here? Anyone in the room know another way to make a circle?" Well, people started making kind of silly, weird suggestions. "Why don't you sit down? Why don't you touch shoes?" and all this kind of stuff. And then she said, "Isn't it interesting that no one has yet said, even those outside the circle have yet said, why don't you enlarge the circle? Invite a few more people in. In fact, why don't you invite everyone in? Why don't you make the circle as large as you can?" Why didn't anyone think about that? Now, what we see with Jesus and his disciples is this lesson in circle making. We see it over and over again. He calls his disciples, he has an inner circle of 3 and the larger group of 12, and then he sends out 70 to be in ministry. And then Paul says more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time experienced the risen Christ. And then we have the day of Pentecost that we heard about a moment ago, when 3,000 were added to the circle on that day. The story of the Christian church really is the story of circle making, and how we have experimented with that, and how we have tried to see what is a way that we can make circles that are ever widening as Jesus called us to do, from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. And the whole Christian history is about circle making and about widening the circle. The history of this congregation is that as well. Go to 4th and Jones, and today you will see what's left of the building that stood at 4th and Jones, the first location of this congregation when it built its first building. First a white frame structure, then a brick structure. You can see that structure today at 4th and Jones. And then the church relocated to 7th and Taylor, and then to the current location. And it started television ministry, and then streaming on the internet, and all the ways to widen circles. That is the story of our church. The mission, the First Street Methodist mission. The various worship venues that we now have, that we did not have only 10 or 11 years ago. The 11:11 service, the disciple worship, the 2 services that we have in the sanctuary, our youth worship in the Justin building. What's that about? That's about circle making. And circles in the Christian faith have Christ at the center, and it's our job to widen those circles. And so that's what we're doing. With this new initiative of starting a worshiping congregation at 7th and Taylor, bringing Lance Marshall onto our staff. He'll be appointed at annual conference to be a part of our clergy staff, and it's his call and it's his passion to be an urban ministry and to extend that ever-widening circle. Mostly to young adults who don't have a faith community of their own. To be invitational and to invite them to be part of a worshiping community. And as on the day of Pentecost, and as we heard from Mr. Mark, to speak the language. What a great, exciting thing this is. I know you have a lot of questions about that. You read the article about Lance, and so I won't talk about his bio. He's going to talk about that some. You may wonder, okay, what about the budget impact? People are always wondering about that. Well, we're in partnership with the annual conference, and our annual conference will underwrite the costs of this initiative for the first 2 years, and then we'll take up more and more of that as time goes on and as that worshiping community grows. It'll be in the West 7th area or the Magnolia area. But what are we doing? We're widening the circle. And we're so glad, Lance, that you are a part of this ministry and you'll be leading us in that. Thanks for being here.